Big show coming up, Hammer. The Kings had a huge dub, but is the coach still in the hot seat?
Well, we talked to the guru, John Casey. 1,000 games he's called. And we talk about, is Bryce Cotton the best import of all time?
And Mike Brown, he's done what every coach wants to do. Find out what it is coming up.
This is The Basketball Show with Shane the Hammer Heel. What they gonna say next?
Our starting five, Hammer, Scott Roth re-signing with the Jack Jumpers until the 2026-27 season. What he's done with that organisation since their inception has been incredible. This is just well-deserved, it feels like.
Well, it does, Jojo. There's no doubt about that. It looks like he could have been born a Tasmanian. He looks like a Tasmanian. I think he's fit in perfectly. I think he's set the culture. He's recruited well. You know, he's firm, but I think that the general public have sort of adopted him as well and related to what he's been able to build for an expansion franchise. And they've had success, and I think they're going to have continued success. So this is a great move by Tassie to be able to lock him in, to be able to make sure they continue on with that momentum.
Yeah, no doubt. Third on the ladder. Going through a little bit of a blip at the moment, but definitely not panic stations, especially given what he's been able to do with them over the last couple of years. The Kings, Hammer, are they back on track? A huge win over the Breakers, 34-19 in that first quarter, and they never looked back. JA with 39 points. The question is, though, is this legit? Are they genuinely back on track, or do you need to see more to be convinced?
Well, you'd have to think that the Kings fans would be frustrated, because when you see a performance like that, you're like, yeah, this is the team that was put together to be able to get this three-peat. You know, they've probably got as much talent as any team, I think, as far as depth goes in the competition. And, you know, they've been really questioned on their desire and the mentality of the way they've played. They've looked disinterested at times, and then they flick a switch and all of a sudden they look like $1 million. So, you know, I think it depends on the players' mindset and attitude, whether this is just a one-off or whether they continue to get on a bit of a roll and really contend for this championship.
A tough one for the New Zealand Breakers as well, being on the receiving end of that. The Brisbane Bullets have won 4 in a row. They were up to 4th on the ladder for a brief moment. They're now in 5th as we're speaking at the moment. How impressed have you been with them? They haven't made the finals for a very long time now. Do you think they've got enough?
Well, I mean, that's yet to be seen. I mean, I think with the amount of money they paid Aaron Baines, they haven't really got much out of the big fella. And then their imports, you know, haven't really been able to contribute. So you take your hat off to Justin Schuller about what they've been able to do, because they've got this core group that I think can move forward. I think they can improve their roster. I think what Justin's done is been able to implement a really solid culture where they're together, they play defense, they play hard. You know what you're going to expect from them. But I don't think this is going to be the year they're going to contend for a championship, but you've got to love what they're doing at the moment.
What about what Bainesy brings off the court, though? I mean, look at the way that he's mentoring Rocco Zikarsky. Are they not getting their money's worth even from that regard?
No, they're not.
Okay, interesting. Maybe one for another day. Big test this weekend for the Bullets anyhow. I want to talk a little bit of NBA now. Mike Brown fined $50,000 for basically having a video session in his press conference after being ejected in the fourth quarter against the Bucks, I think it was. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious, showing a bit of character and getting his point across. $50,000, let's be honest, for someone like Mike Brown is pocket change. What did you make of the whole situation?
He got it out of his ashtray, Jojo. Don't worry about that, the fine. But every coach has wanted to do exactly this, because as a coach, you get so many clips and you sit around with the coaching staff and say, can you believe that these fools called this? And then you want to do exactly that. Roll out the laptop, exactly show the people what you're seeing as well. And he got his money's worth. He was able to vent a little bit. I loved it.
5.
These are our Hoops highlights thanks to Boost Mobile. The Joker is kicking us off this week.
Pass to Aaron Gordon.
51 Denver in front. 8 threes for the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic, 15.7 assists.
4. Picked up by Green. Bounce pass to Brooks, and he nails it down.
Here in this ball game, the 3 ball has been the difference. But look at Taylor Brooks just catching the body here on the break and running in stride.
3.
Something going on.
Oh, a little bit of a...
There's the steal. Here comes Pinder. Oh! Keanu Pinder! What about that?
Got it with ace, didn't he?
2.
Smith. Time winding down. Mr. Smith, take a bow. Tassie got it in bounds. Doyle can't make the shot. And Chris Smith walks them off in Brisbane.
1.
No timeouts left for the Bucks. Here comes Dane. 3 seconds. Dane pulls for the win. Dame time is alive.
Gotta love Dame time. Those are our Hoops highlights thanks to Boost Mobile. Matty Logue is with us for the Lowdown. Matt, great to have you on the show as always. We're also talking coaches today, the Kings. They've had some interesting discussions of late.
Yeah, like obviously back-to-back home losses. The Kings are in 4th, and there was a lot of pressure applied. They went to Adelaide, and everything was on the line, and that performance was subpar. It led to serious discussions, I'm told, on the Friday about mood. Sydney Kings coach about his future. Now, I think he's bought himself some time with that Breakers performance on the Sunday. It was a special occasion, with obviously the breast cancer day, and it was a remarkable day and a great result. But it must be said that New Zealand Breakers team were busted. They'd come off a game a couple of days earlier. There were guys out there that were not up to it, and that showed, and they're struggling. So put that performance aside. Sunday is a massive game for the Kings, and I'm told that basically the serious discussions won't just stop here. It depends on what happens now moving forward. And I think mood will be there for the rest of the season, guys. I really do. But beyond that, and depending on how the Kings finish the season, there are big question marks.
And what about the 36ers? They're shooting for the stars.
Yeah, obviously reported that, they're interested in Goorjian. Look, that's been out there for a fair while that the 36ers would like to at least have a conversation with Goorjian. As we've revealed on the basketball show several times, they actually reached out to Goorjian before CJ was sacked. So when they were struggling, there were conversations to bring Goorjian in then. It didn't happen. And my understanding is that there's a renewed push to speak to Goorj. Obviously, Goorj has made it clear that he'll come back domestically next season. He will potentially, I think, Asia's the favourite. But you've got the Kings situation, the Adelaide situation. But 36ers officials definitely want to have a conversation with him. But I think there's a big convincing game going on here, because I think Goorj does have doubts about the club, but it's not going to stop the 36ers from trying. Club legends, guys, they want Ninnis as coach, but I think the club know that they probably need a bigger name, and Ninnis will remain there in some capacity. So it's interesting to sort of see what does happen, but at the end of the day, they've been chasing Goorj for a long time, and it hasn't happened. So, good luck.
All right, the great man, John Casey, is with us. Casey, always great to have you on the show. We've been talking coaches, and there are a couple of positions up for grabs across the NBL. Scott Ninnis and Justin Tatum, obviously, occupying those in interim capacity at the moment. Let's get straight to it. Should both of them be reappointed at this point?
Well, I can't see a reason not to reappoint Justin Tatum at the moment. I think he's done an outstanding job where he's taken that team, and you can see the improvement that he's been able to get out of each and every player. So big tick for Tatum for me. I'd give him the job now. I don't know what else he has to prove, and they're not going to get much better than him. He's an evolving coach, and I really think that he is a coach of the future as well. So I like what he's doing. Scott Ninnis is a different scenario. Look, he's doing a great job. If they'd held on against Cairns the other night when they led by 11 at three-quarter time, or in the last quarter, then he'd be 4-3 and his team would be fourth on the ladder over the last 7 games that have been played. So a remarkable job by Scott Ninnis, but they would be derelict in their duty if they weren't talking to Brian Goorjian, if they weren't scouring the market to see who else is out there available. And look, I think Scott Ninnis is going to be involved in the Adelaide 36ers next season in a capacity. If it's not head coach, it could well be the basketball manager's role, which they're looking to fill, or an assistant's role. He bleeds for the club. He's done so much for the 36ers. We know he's been a part of all 4 of their championship. He wants to be involved, and I'm sure he will be involved. It's just a matter of if they can get a coach with better credentials than him and more experience, or if he takes the job. And I've heard Brian Goorjian's name being mentioned. Of course, he'd be a perfect fit here in Adelaide. But there are also other coaches out there that I think that could do the job in Adelaide.
Yeah, I agree with that case. And I think Scott Ninnis is somebody that, because he has been a player, a coach, I think he has to be involved at some level. And I think he's doing a tremendous job under difficult situation. I think with Tatum, I'm not sure why they're holding back on just appointing him right now. I think if they did that, it would give him even more opportunity to be able to build for next year and the years after. Creating those relationships, I think he's been able to turn this program around. They're playing for him. As you say, I think they're playing better individually and collectively to be able to get these results. So I think they need to push the button on that and give him an opportunity to start thinking about not only making the playoffs and going deep into the playoffs, but also planning for next year.
They'd hate to lose him, Hammer, wouldn't they? Someone to come in over the top and drag him out of there. I think it's a good point you make. Let's get it done right now.
He seems happy. The Hawks seem happy from all reports. So we'll see what happens there. Guys, the foul count has been a contentious issue recently. It keeps going up and up and up. How have you seen it from your point of view, Case? And do you have any suggestions as to what can potentially be done about it?
Look, there are too many fouls at the moment, aren't there? There were 12 individual players who fouled out last round, which is the most this season. And so far this season, 57 players have fouled out. Now, that's the most in the last 7 years, maybe even longer. And it's just too many. There's still 20% of the season to go. So why are these players fouling out? And I put it on the players because they just need to make adjustments. You get 5 fouls. Even if you get a dodgy one go against you, there's still 4. And I see players, and we commentate, and we mention it during the commentary, that was a cheap foul or that was a silly foul. If they take those fouls out, maybe they don't exit the game early. But I think it's on the players to adjust. And one suggestion that's been floated is getting ex-players involved. And I like that idea. I like the idea of Shane Hill or Damon Lowry or Mark Worthington, those type of players, or anyone exiting the game right now, get them involved in refereeing because I think they'd be perfect for the job.
Well, I think you're right about one thing, Case. It's about the players to be able to adjust. And I think when you look at Bull Quoll, when you look at Alan Williams, these guys have been able to get themselves in foul trouble every game. They have to be able to adjust. I mean, I don't know how you allow yourself to be taken off the court with 3 fouls in the first half. Not give yourself the opportunity to be able to perform for your team and individually being able to get it done as well. And I think when you talk about past players, I think it's a good idea. But there's going to be players that will be fitted for it, like anything in society. There's going to be people that really fit the role. And there's going to be people like myself that wouldn't fit the role, Case. The last thing I'm doing is put on the black and white stripes. There's no way I'm changing to the other side. Cut it out.
I thought you'd enjoy that. I just threw it out there with a little bit of a bait on the end and thought, what will Hammer come up with here?
Absolutely brilliant. That was definitely my next question. Hammer, would you, however, act as a consultant in that capacity potentially?
Well, maybe not myself, but I think having past players be involved in those sort of decisions and advisory roles, I think is really important. And I'm sure the NBL already going down that track of having players, and particularly some of the commentators that are around as well, that have been around for a long time, to be able to give really good advice and make sure the league is going in the right direction.
Now, guys, let's get on to the real news of the week. John Casey notching up game 1,000 over the past few days. The voice of basketball, on behalf of everyone here, congratulations. We love the fact that we have you on the show, and I feel like this is an opportunity where we can pick your brain a little bit. You've obviously been involved with the league for a long, long time. You've seen imports come and go. Who, in your opinion, is the best you've ever seen?
Oh, it's a hot topic, isn't it, at the moment, particularly with what Bryce Cotton is doing. And Bryce Cotton is clearly the best player in the country right now. And if he's able to sustain the level of what he's doing for a little bit longer, then maybe he'll overtake my best of all time, and that's Leroy Loggins. Now, Leroy did it for 21 years. He was outstanding at both ends of the floor, winning Defensive Player of the Year titles that Bryce Cotton is not going to win. So Bryce has done it for 8 years, and he's been the best at it. But 21 versus 8, I give it to Leroy just through the longevity. But if Bryce keeps going for a few more years, then maybe he'll catch him and overtake him. We all suffer from recency bias. But as you say, Joe, I was lucky to be there in the formative years of the 1980s. So I saw Leroy Loggins up close. I saw Al Green and Mark Davis and the Alabama slammer James Crawford, who was my favourite player initially because just the electricity he brought and the athleticism that he brought, it was just an amazing scenario. And all those players would still be competitive today. It's always tough to compare eras, but those guys would still be competitive today. And have a look at Kevin Brooks. There's great highlights of his career on the internet. And if you go back and look what he was doing 20 years ago or 25 years ago now, there are players that aren't doing what he was doing then now. His game stacks up right now. He'd be a superstar, Kevin Brooks. So I think that certainly the players of the past are just as good as the ones we've got at the moment. And yes, there is a higher quality and a higher standard of the game right across the board. But those guys were exceptional. You know, Ricky Grace, Darryl McDonald, they had triple doubles in grand finals. They set the tone. They were fantastic to watch, and they'd be stars in any era.
Well, I don't think they'd just be competitive. I think what you finish with, Case, is exactly right. Those guys would be stars. The 4 players that I have on my list that I was lucky enough to be able to play with and against, 5 years with Leroy Loggins, and he was just a superstar. He could play in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. And sometimes it's just about opportunities at that time. He found himself in Australia. There wasn't the same pathways back in the 80s and 90s to be able to get to the NBA from Australia. They weren't looking at the NBL. Mark Davis and Al Green, Alabama slammer, James Crawford, they were the 4 that I had on my list. They would still be dominating in the NBL if they were playing in this era. It's a fact. They were fantastic players, and it's nice to be able to reminisce. Bryce Cotton, no doubt, is the best player right now, though.
Time to talk Supercoach NBL with expert Tom Hirsch. Tom, the Hawks, they've got plenty of doubles. We know Carl Adnam is back in the league and how efficient he can be. What have you got for us this week?
Yeah, look, the Hawks are one of six teams on the double this week, along with Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, Perth and Southeast Melbourne. They've been playing some great basketball, as you guys know. Gary Clark is one player I brought in last week and put the captain tag on, and then he absolutely delivered. And I think certainly someone that people should consider for this week if they can. But also Sam Froling, another player on the Hawks, that's been playing some really good basketball. And if you're looking for a bit of a smoky from the Hawks, Young Lee, the young player who's been getting increased minutes the last few weeks and averaging around 20 Supercoach points, a bit of value for your bench, one to consider if you need an option at that guard or forward spot. But otherwise, I mean, the main players that you want to target this week, as you said, Joe, last week, if you don't have Bryce Cotton in your team, you're doing it wrong. And that absolutely holds true. He's been absolutely sensational. And if you have him, put the captain tag on him. If you don't have him, find a way to bring him in. They've got a double this week. They've got a double next week. He's a must-have. If you can't find a way to bring in Bryce Cotton, Mitch Creek, another great option. And obviously with Alan Williams out for the first game of this round for Southeast Melbourne, everything's going to run through him. And he's also been in great form. And then Isaac Humphries is another player who's been doing really well for Adelaide the last little while. Does have a double this week, another one in round 18, but not next week. So just to factor that in also. But there's plenty of great options this week. Those are probably the 4 players I'd look to target and potentially consider as the captain this week.
This is a co-production by News Corp Australia and Closer Sports.